I think this was in like British Raj, India, right? There were heaps of snakes, right? And then there was like basically a problem with snakes. And then they created an incentive. If you kill a snake and you bring it, you'll be paid X amount, right? Like whatever. So what people started doing was so I think that's the big thing, right? It's like, you want a life well lived. And I'd say 99.9% of people having some sort of a moral, ethical framework is part of a life well lived, right? And for the rest of the people, if that's not the case, it's actually a bit worrying, right? Like, I think that's the definition of like a... All right, hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Pathway Property Podcast. So today we're actually going to be doing an interesting one. We're going to be talking about the ethics of property investing.
This is like a throwback to my law school days and arts days.
Throwback to your Bachelor of Arts at Melbourne Uni, sitting on the lawn. But it's interesting. I feel like it's a very relevant topic right now. A lot of people are talking about it. You know, I made a post, and the inspiration is I made a Facebook post the other day with one of our clients that we did a podcast with, and it was about how he has 9 properties at the age of 26. Very impressive, and obviously there were a lot of comments, you know, roasting him, right? You know, just being like talking about the ethics of property investing. So, you know, I thought it'd be good to run through an episode on that, right? You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of people out there. We work with a lot of doctors, and I think a lot of doctors, you know, they're obviously very big on their morals and their ethics. You know what I mean? It makes sense.
Are you trying to say something about lawyers?
Bro, lawyers, but like it makes sense, right? It's like you'd hope that they're
of course, they are literally tested for it.
So a lot of them, they ask this question. You know what I mean? They're like, okay, is what I'm doing unethical, right? Now, that's hopefully what we're gonna cover in this episode.
So I guess the question is property investing and building a property portfolio unfair or unethical?
Yeah. And if it is, or like, because at the end of the day, there's no one version of what that looks like, right? So are there fair versions? Now, I think the one thing I'd say over here is, I guess everyone has their own moral, ethical framework, right? Like, I guess you and I would be pretty similar, right? Probably wouldn't be the exact same, but it'd be pretty similar given our backgrounds, right? Like, you know, life, philosophical, religious,
we've been friends for like
whatever,
10 years,
right?
So we kind of grew up together a little bit as well.
Exactly, right? There's almost like a didactic process, a didactic moral. I don't want this to sound like some academic pretentious academic pretentious one, but I wanted to start off with actually something interesting, not talking about property, right? Because I think a lot of people listening in, they wouldn't even know what their moral framework is. A lot of people, they're just coming in and they're saying property investing is unethical. So I think it'd be cool, especially, I mean, for those who don't know, Nirvan did a Bachelor of Arts, so he's a bit of a philosopher. I've always been, he did JD, so he's a lawyer. All lawyers are wannabe philosophers that just needed to make money.
Honestly, that's the pipeline.
That's the
it's
pipeline.
Like arts to law.
Arts to law. I'm a little bit of a philosopher myself, but I'm the small philosopher in the family. My brother.
I mean, you did. I did
a lot of anthropology subjects.
Yeah, and you did tutoring for these concepts.
I actually was a philosophy tutor, or like an essay writing tutor, primarily in the philosophy space, and for med students or prospective med students. And for those who don't know, my brother, he's in the philosophy space as an academic.
You could say he's a professional philosopher.
He is a professional philosopher, which to my disdain sometimes. It's like, you know, we'll just be eating and I'll be wanting to talk about something banal, like, you know, just talk about, like, you know, the footy or something, and then he's like, but why the footy? I'm like, bro, I don't care, bro. I just wanna watch my actually I don't want to talk about
kicking a ball from one end to the other.
What is the social structure of the necessity? I'm like, bro, I'm watching Arsenal versus PSG Champions League final. You know, what's that this Sunday. It's going to be interesting to see how it goes, but got a boo as well from the background, so we're gonna see how that goes. But yeah, that's hopefully that gives me some credibility in the space.
Yes.
And actually, before we jump into one more funny one, we used to, when I first came to Australia, I used to live in, I guess, one of these share houses with a bunch of friends, right? And there was around 7 of us there, so it was a bit. And this guy was basically living there. He didn't formally live there, but he was there 24/7.
I was a resident.
And they were all
resident scholar.
Yeah, I was like the youngest in the house. Everyone else there was actually a lot older. So they were all in like, there was one person doing his PhD in law. They were all like in their mid to late 20s, and they were all philosophers. So we just used to sit around and have these crazy discussions. So hopefully that lends to my credibility as well. But before we jump into property, let's talk about a few different perspectives, right? On how people view, I've got 4 here. I mean, there's like 100. There's like, I guess you could almost say there's an infinite amount of these, right? But there's 4 that I think are quite common in modern Western democratic secular societies. I'd say these are, if I would, which
sort of the cornerstones of ethics and societal ethics.
Exactly, right? So I got these 4. I want to touch base on them, and maybe you listening at home, this might be framing your thinking. So let's start off.
You might agree with something. You're like, actually, this applies to me, but you don't know what the name is. So you might figure out what the name of that framework is.
Yeah. So let's start off with a pretty common basic one, utilitarianism. Give us a quick basic understanding of what utilitarianism is.
So in a nutshell, it's about the greatest good for the greatest number of people, right? So
it's like mathematicians love it, right? Because it's like statistical. How can we distribute as much goodness?
So the key individual here are like Bentham, Mill, and the focus here is on the consequence of actions, right? Not the means, right? So let's keep it as a nutshell statement.
Yeah, it's like someone who's moral. If your moral philosophy is I want as many good for as many people, the way that we get there isn't super important as long as people aren't getting hurt along the way. That's like that view, right? Next, let's talk about what's the second one that we have?
Second one, we had libertarian property rights. So Locke and Nozick.
So it's like, I guess this is like one of the, like currently, like I guess a way a lot of, I guess people who are like a little bit more towards like the right wing, this would be like a big influence in their thinking. It's like for them, the biggest moral, the biggest thing when it comes to ethics is freedom, right? So it's like a free market capitalism, freedom of the individual. It's like the individual should be free to do anything as long as it does not impede on another person's freedom. Right? So I'm free to do this, but I'm not free to come and do that in your face and touch you, right? Because then
please don't.
Impeding on your freedom of movement, right?
Correct.
So I think we'll go into how this relates to property, but I think that's a very basic summary of that.
Yeah.
Then we have, what's number 3?
Deontology. So that's the sort of Kantian worldview.
Yeah.
So that's about, what do they call it? Universality.
Yeah.
So that means like don't treat people as the means, treat them as the ends. So it's kind of focusing on the person.
Do unto others what you would have done unto you. It's like it's almost a religious concept, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it is.
It's
right?
a golden rule, as they say,
like
right?
the golden rule, right? So it's kind of like a perfect analogy is if you're a landlord, right, and you do something to your tenant, right? Ask yourself, if I was the tenant, would you be okay with that, right? So that's I guess that's like the deontological view, right?
Yeah.
Or the Kantian view, whatever you want to call it, right? Again, trying to keep this as non-pretentious as possible, right? And then number 4, we have what do we have there?
We've got the Rawlsian justice, so like that idea of the veil of ignorance. It took me quite a bit of time to wrap my head around this this concept at law school and in arts. But it's about that veil of ignorance. So like, let's say, like all things being equal, you not being able to see who's on the other side of what they are receiving, right? And that idea of the difference principle, right? So in the sense that like inequalities must benefit the least disadvantaged, right? So if there's any inequality, it needs to benefit the least disadvantaged people in society.
Beautiful. So in reality, so these are, I guess, 4 of the cornerstones of Western secular democracies. It's interesting. I'd say your different countries and different parties within those countries, you know, are more influenced. Like I think if you look at more right-wing, like economically right-wing parties, that like libertarian philosophy is, that philosophy of freedom and that being the ultimate moral good is a lot more prevalent.
100%.
Whereas if you look at, I guess, more left-wing parties, you know, Labour in Australia, Greens, or you go to like a lot of European countries, Scandinavian, it's more like they're more focused on the utilitarian
and
as
so
well as
also
Kantian.
they say.
Or so they say, right? Like from an ideological perspective, from like what politicians do, that's another story.
Another
at the end,
podcast.
that's more like a Machiavellian thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, pretty much.
But that's, I guess, the reality is society, especially Western society, is not, and again, these are very basic, right? Like people spend their whole life studying each of the, like one concept within each of these.
Yeah.
So this is a very broad overview, but I'm guessing most of you don't have your
We're
whole
probably
life.
strawmanning a few of them, but
Yeah, probably, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, just a basic summary. And I'm guessing most of you don't have your whole life to study one philosophical moral concept. You're just trying to shape your own morals so that you can obviously do what you want to do, but you can still feel good about yourself. Because at the end of the day, I've met some clients where they've bought a bunch of properties, right? And they actually do feel bad, right? They're like, oh, Arshad, I'm making money, but is this the right way to make money, right? So, and that's something I never tell people what's right or like our job so I want to create one
100%.
distinction over here. The stuff we're talking about is not our opinions. It's more just like frameworks on how to think about things. And then the second thing is our job as a buyer's agent is to act on your, like the moral duty for us as a buyer's agent is to do what you want us to do.
Yeah.
Right.
We act on your behalf. We're an advocate for you.
Exactly.
And we work on the strategy that you have sort of set the goals for.
Exactly. Right. So it's like we might be buying someone 10 properties. It might not. We might have someone else who thinks that that's unethical.
Yeah.
But that doesn't matter to
place.
us because our moral duty is to do what is in best interest of the client.
Exactly.
Right. I guess this is like corporate ethics, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what they call it.
This is what we learned in law school about, like, especially this is actually interesting, bit of a side point about defending the accused
people will be
or
like,
the
he's a
criminal.
murderer.
Yeah.
How can you defend
But they
a
need
murderer?
representation.
They need
Not that I'm saying that people who have 10 properties are criminals.
Yeah, but it's like
not by any means whatsoever. But it's just about you.
That's our job.
That's our job.
Or that our job,
Correct.
the ethics of our job is to do that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, let's look at, I guess, property investing from these
lenses,
these different lenses, right? And how you can think about it. And then at the end, we'll actually talk about what would be because I think under all of these lenses, there is an ethical way to invest.
Yeah.
Right? Now, we'll go through all of them, right? And we'll talk about how it would view property investing and how property investing can be done through that framework in an ethical way.
Yeah.
So let's start off with the easy one, which is like the libertarian ethics, which is like freedom is the ultimate good. In this scenario, the freedom to invest is the ultimate good, right? So in this scenario, I guess it's like property investing is not unethical, right? Whatever, at least as my basic understanding through this framework. Yeah. It's like buy as many assets as you want, as many of those assets as you want. As long as you're not doing anything illegal, right? You're not impeding on someone else's rights, right? Or you're not like impeding on someone else's legal rights. So it's like, if you have a tenant, right, and you're not doing anything illegal to them, you're giving them, so in each state, there's like minimum housing standards, right? As long as you're meeting your legal obligations.
And your obligation to the law and society.
Your obligation to the law and society, right? You're free to buy as many properties as you want, right?
Probably like some of the restrictions we have in place in law would actually go counter this particular framework.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
your first home buyer schemes or whatever.
Yeah.
This would probably be a little bit more against the grain of libertarianism.
Exactly. So some of the people who have this philosophy, they might be pushing political agendas, or I don't know if I like the term agendas, but political policies where they want to make maybe the market more fair for every buyer, right? From a pure freedom perspective, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, why should a first home buyer have this, right? Whereas an investor doesn't have this.
Yeah.
Why is stamp duty different from state to state,
Yep.
right? So maybe they'd want more freedoms,
Yep.
right? Now that's the easy one. It's just like, okay, if this is your philosophy, you can pretty much end the video over here. Fill out shoot us a message, sign up with us as a client, and let's start buying properties, right? Probably that interview that I did with that client who has 9 properties, I'd say his philosophy is a bit more in this direction. And again, there's nothing.
It's kind of like if it's legal, it's okay.
If it's exactly right. Now, I'd say
that's not our opinion. Again,
it's not like we're not discussing our opinions, right? You know what I mean? Because whatever opinion we have, there's going to be someone out there pissed at us. And I don't want to get into that, right? So that's number one. Let's jump into, I guess, talking more about the utilitarian view. How would these people view property investing?
I guess utilitarianism is about the greater good to the greatest amount of people, right? So I guess if you want to translate that into the property market, and the property market is multifaceted, right? So we don't just have property owners, right? Yeah. We have renters, people who don't have the means to purchase property for whatever reason, just because of the nature of the market. Yeah. We're not talking about the nature of the market per se. We're talking about us being inside in the market and doing whatever we're doing inside that market, right?
So, and there's like so many parties, right? There's your residential homeowners, your residential investors, there's your tenants, your commercial property owners, your commercial tenants, your builders, your tradies. There's like heaps of people.
Exactly.
There's the people who work in real estate, like people like us, you know what I mean? So there's multiple parties, right? So someone who has this view that'd be like, how can we maximize the amount of good for all parties, and there will be trade-offs along the way.
So I guess in that perspective, it's like we should be like adding stock is a good thing, number one. So there should be more stock on the market just generally, and that goes for both ends in the sense that like the supply from housing availability, although there are natural and economic constraints that play into that, but we should do our best to achieve that. And then secondly, from a rental stock perspective as well, which is obviously you going out there and purchasing a property, you know, for some people it's a light bulb moment, especially if you're in your like early 20s. The property that you're renting out, the person who's rented out to you is an investor. So the only reason why you're renting is because there's an investor that
exists,
has that property, right?
Yeah.
So that investor in that scenario is producing some sort of good to you in exchange for what they're getting, which is obviously the rent in return, but they still have to carry those previously negatively gearable difference between the rent and the mortgage repayment that they have, right? So I think that's number one. And then second is speculation or hoarding. I think hoarding in specific is bad because if you're hoarding, you are not creating a greater good for as many people as possible. So let's say you have we had this problem in Melbourne and some other capital cities where people used to, especially foreign investors, used to purchase property. It was literally not worth them from an economic perspective to rent it out because they would have to deal with wear and tear, X, Y, and Z. So what they would do is just leave it vacant. And obviously, in that sense, you're hoarding an available asset for people to live in and a home for people to live in. So that would be under this framework, something bad, right? And this is something we've penalized as a state through our
vacancy rate tax.
Yeah, exactly.
So if I think about like, and it's hard to know because outside of philosophy, there's economics, right? Like some decisions, you won't even know how they affect other decisions, right? Like there's that famous story where I think this was in like British Raj, India, right? There were heaps of snakes, right? And then there was like basically a problem with snakes. And then they put a they created an incentive. If you kill a snake and you bring it, you'll be paid X amount, right? Like whatever, 10 rupees or whatever. I can't remember what the number was. So what people started doing was they just started breeding snakes, right? So it created more of a snake problem, right? So economically, it's hard to know what the outcomes of specific decisions are, or we'll leave that to the economists, right? Which maybe is a different podcast as well. But I think a utilitarian view would be like, okay, how can we create policy, right? There's, I guess, the policy level and the individual level, right? But it's basically, how can we create policy that allows for young homeowners to be able to afford buying their home, renters to not be to not get like hit really hard from rental growth, then investors to still be able to build their wealth at a sustainable rate, right? And people in the industry, right, still being able to make money along the way. And all of that tied into ensuring that the economy grows and you're not setting a policy agenda that's going to result in capital flight, right? Because there's always the danger of creating something that's more fair, but there's just less, right? Because people are like, okay,
it actually goes opposite the utilitarianism, because that means there's not
because utilitarianism doesn't care about fairness.
No,
it cares about
greater good.
Greater good, right? So in a utilitarian, at a very basic level, if there's two individuals, one has 200 and another has 2, right? Which is like a huge gap. He would prefer that over a situation where one person has 10 and the other person has 1.
Yeah, so the pie is smaller.
The pie is smaller, and both of those individuals have less as well. Right? Yeah. This person has 50% less. I don't want to do the maths, whatever, right? So both people have less, right? Even though the difference is less.
Exactly.
Whereas the utilitarian would be like, okay, even though the difference is bigger.
Let's grow the pie and grow the slice.
Exactly, right? Now, from a personal, like, what can you do as an individual if you're looking at this and you're like, this is broadly speaking my philosophy? I think a couple of things, right? Number one is, I'd say you'd make your investing strategy heavily targeted towards putting new stock on market, right? So, now from this perspective, it might not be what's best for your portfolio. It's not going to be bad. You will still make money. I can guarantee you'll still make money, right? If you
the
do
fundamentals
it well,
are
if you do it well, your fundamentals, so on and so forth. You might not make as much money as the guy who has a libertarian view, but okay, you're more happy with your broader philosophy. Now,
you might also have less headache in terms of like maintenance and whatnot relating to the property asset
potentially, right?
So there's pros and cons.
So I think in this view, probably what you do is you'd focus heavily on putting new stock on the market, because you're putting more money into the industry. You're putting more stock of it. You're creating more available stock. You're just doing more.
You're increasing the pie.
So whether that's like, off the plans, house and land packages, or buying a property and doing a development, or buying a property, renovating it, building at the back, adding value, adding a granny flat, right? Adding value,
creating a rooming house.
Exactly, right? Like things that pretty much adding value. Not buying an existing asset, holding that, and then you're taking that away from someone who could have bought. Now, I think the one part of this it's a bit simplified as well is maybe because this is, I guess, what Labour's trying to do right now with their new budget, right? But one group of people that's a very large group of people that get hurt is your renters, right? So basically what's going to happen is renters in your outer suburb markets, right, where there's a lot of new stock, they're going to have a good time because there's going to be a lot of rental listings available. Rent's going to not going to grow as fast. But renters in your inner suburbs, because there's less people buying because of negative gearing changes, they're going to be hurt. So in this situation, okay, first home buyers are doing better, right? But how do we find a balance that ensure renters do well as well? So maybe this is where, okay, you're building your portfolio. You might buy a few out in the outer suburbs, but then you're like, okay, I'm actually going to do a few in the inner suburbs, right?
To contribute to rental stock
in those areas as well, right? Now, at the end of the day, obviously, most people don't have that much money to just be doing things like this, but just hypothetically,
all things being
right?
equal.
Like you buy something in an inner suburb that's fully developed, and you're like, okay, I'm putting some rental stock on the market. I'm going to build 2 houses at the back. I've put 3 rental properties on the market in a market where there's very little people. So I'm helping the renters there. So that's the utilitarian view. I think it's going to be a heavily new stock oriented view. Next, let's talk about, I guess, Kantian view.
Yeah.
Right? I feel like it might be actually quite similar in terms of the outcomes, but I'll maybe let you jump in because
Yeah, that's fine. So that's the deontological view.
Yeah.
So I think the crux here is it probably shifts the ideas a little bit, because obviously, remember, with Kant, we're thinking about the people as the ends, not as the means, right?
Yeah.
Then the shift in mindset then comes from the question that we ask, which is shelter a duty in the first place?
Is housing a universal basic
exactly
right?
And then that's twofold too. So is being able to buy a property or own your home, which technically, like, you do own your home from a registered proprietor perspective, but you do have a mortgage on it, right? So you don't really own the home. So if you want to really break this down, but that's number one. And then number two is rental stock a duty. Right, so those are two questions there.
One thing we haven't even touched on is like housing commission. That's like a big one over here as well. I don't know if we have time to get into that.
Yeah,
but
true. Like social housing or affordable housing schemes that we have. Again, that probably goes against the grain of libertarianism per se.
Yeah.
But in this worldview, it will probably align a little bit more.
I think like this worldview would probably hold closest to housing as a universal basic right. Right. Yeah. And probably I think this view would say, okay, if you're going to invest, only investing if it's new stock investing. Yeah. Right.
And it has to be universal as well. It has to be universalized. This buying as much as possible, or in that framework, or the stock that needs to be supplied needs to be universalized across the board. It can't just be for one group over another.
Exactly. Right. So I think this group, this philosophy would change the way lending works quite a lot to make things a lot more universalized, right? It would change the way, probably have caps on the amount of properties that people can own as well. Yeah. Right. I think that would be something that comes under this philosophy, right? There would be a lot more favorability towards tenants overall. Yeah. Right?
Seeing tenants as, I guess, humanizing tenants in that sense.
Yeah, to like the utmost.
You are
ideally in all of these scenarios, we're humanizing tenants.
Then obviously, but like as an agent, that you as the property owner, you are then, you have a relationship to the tenant, which is more than just you getting a rental yield out of it.
You have like a moral duty towards them. Yeah. Okay. That's solid, right? So, and the last one, honestly, I don't fully understand this moral framework, so I'm going to let you.
The Rawlsian framework?
The Rawlsian framework.
Okay, let me
What about the Nirvanian framework? What does that say? No.
I think
Rawlsian framework.
I think the Rawlsian one, obviously the idea of veil of ignorance and the difference principle, I think, like as a consequence of like thinking through all of this, it probably will result in the same kind of outcomes as the other two that we just discussed. But it's basically like, would you accept the market conditions as they are and the rules and the state of the general property market behind a veil? Now, I'm simplifying this.
If you had like no vested interest.
No vested interest.
If you were like like an alien, basically.
So would you say this is a good, like is purchasing as many properties as possible a good behind a veil?
And I think this is like, I'm a big believer in this in terms of how we should vote as individuals. Because, you see it quite a lot, right? People always say they vote based on their ethics, but in reality, they vote based on their personal circumstances, right?
And it's as tribes as well. Like, that's a problem.
Yeah, people will be like, okay, I'm like super left-wing, then they buy their first investment property, and now they're like other side. Yeah. Which, like, I'm a big believer that when you're voting, try to think of that greater good, try to be agnostic to your individual circumstances, right?
So this one basically is trying to put you into the position of think as an alien, basically. So like you, as a renter, as a property owner, as a person who's trying to get into the market, etc. So it seems like a bit of a cop-out kind of framework, but in a nutshell, that's what.
I reckon that one requires a bit too much thinking, because then that's gonna require us to
really question every single.
It's gonna require us to imprint our own biases onto it, right? Which that's not what this podcast is here for. So I think the main thing the conclusion that I wanted to come to is. If you're someone out there thinking property investing is unethical, right? I'd say two things. number one, first think about what your ethical framework is,
Mm-hmm.
right? Some of you might already have that, some of you might not, right? But so if you don't, think through that ethical framework.
Mm-hmm.
And ideally, for those watching this podcast, you'll see that in almost every single ethical framework, there is a way to property invest,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're, there's heaps of people in Australia who, their view is more on the libertarian, freedom, liberal
Mm-hmm.
view, right? For you, it's like, honestly, it's just like go out there and create a really good portfolio,
Yep.
use your wealth, use your hard work in your circumstances, right? Leverage all of your circumstances, whether it's your family circumstances, your personal circumstances, your hard work, leverage it all to build your portfolio and build your personal wealth. That's that framework. If you're utilitarian, you're probably going to be like, okay, I can still build a massive portfolio, but I'm going to do that by putting more stock onto the market, being invested in those sort of
Increasing the
pathways.
pie and increasing your slice of the pie
Exactly.
at the same time.
Yeah, 100%, right? And then if you're in that like Kantian view, I mean, this one, it'd be interesting to actually have a philosopher here, because they might just say like all of
You're
your,
wrong.
yeah, it might just be like all your interpretations are like completely incorrect, but
We're just trying our best.
we don't have anyone there, so we're just property guys, right?
Yeah.
But the Kantian view, I think even if you're in that space, you'd probably be like, look, I'm gonna probably focus on new stock,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm probably not going to do as many. Maybe I might do 2 to 3, right? I'm not going to over leverage and create systems that are going to be not available to other people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
At a broader level.
Probably create an environment where the tenant is valued as a different part of the puzzle in terms of your, like, rather than just looking at them as a rental yield actor, treating them in a different way, right? Like going out of your way to making sure that they're looked after in that sense. So while, for example, utilitarian might just go out there and like build a rooming house or create a co-living opportunity or do a value add with a granny flat, a Kantian type person will say, I want to make sure that
the house is how I would like it. I'm going to put like Versace floor or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm going to put a pergola with a barbecue stand at the back, right?
So,
it's like a lot more of that, which again might change the profitability.
Yep.
But I don't think any of these would make it an unprofitable
No,
endeavor.
it's just a different way of approaching it, which is fair.
Beautiful. There you go. So for everyone listening and everyone watching, long story short, property investing is not unethical. There's it just depends on
how you do it.
there's just your ethical framework.
Yeah.
And within your ethical framework, can you find a way to do it?
Yep.
And so next time someone starts talking about this stuff to us, I'm just gonna be like, watch this video.
Basically.
Like, I'm not even gonna engage in the conversation. I'm just gonna be like,
basically, we had this conversation, so we don't have to have that conversation.
Yeah, I feel like we've
half
had
an hour conversation.
We've had it because we get a lot of young clients, and naturally some of them.
It's a good question to ask.
It is, right? Because at the end of the day, like, money is nice, but we live in a society. We live in a society, right? We do live in a society, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, humans are moral. Like, ideally, you're a moral agent, right?
Yeah.
You want to do good and you want to feel good. Like, it's very, very hard. Even like, when you watch movies, right? The villains that are most compelling are not the ones that are just evil for the sake of being evil. They're the ones who they think what they're doing is good. They think what they're doing is right. They believe they have. It's like, we as humans, we are moral people. We empathize with moral people, right? Maybe we might look at them, like we might watch a movie and be like, okay, that guy's conclusion is stupid, right? Like, okay, Thanos is like, okay, if you have all this power, why are you killing half of everyone? Why don't you just create more vegetables? You know what I mean? Feed more people. But it's like, the idea is like, he's like ultimate utilitarian, right?
Yeah.
Thanos. I'm using the most generic example because I feel like everyone's watched Avengers, but his whole thing is like, okay, if I wipe out half of the population, more people will be the total happiness will be more than what the happiness was when everyone was there.
I just had an idea.
Yeah.
For the thumbnail of this?
Yeah, we're going to put Thanos over there.
We're going to put Thanos, and then we're going to have that, the thing that they did in Philosophy 101, the train tracks, and you're having the lever of like the train going straight or the train turning right, and like 3 people on the bottom of the train.
Yeah, no, for sure. There you go. Me, you, and
we're going
to be the 3 people. There you
Basically.
go.
Anyway.
So I think that's the big thing, right? It's like, you want a life well lived, and I'd say 99.9% of people having some sort of a moral, ethical framework is part of a life well lived.
Yep.
Right. And for the rest of the people, if that's not the case, it's actually a bit worrying, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think that's the definition of like a psychopath, a sociopath, whatever,
Basically.
right? So yeah, hopefully this has provided you some insight on doing that, being able to do that in the property investing space. If you want to have a philosophy chat about it, then you're gonna
talk to someone else.
No, I was gonna say I'm happy to, but you're gonna have to take me out for dinner.
You have to watch this one first.
Yeah, watch this one, and then if you want to talk philosophy, then you're gonna have to take me out for dinner, right? I'm happy to do that over a feed. But if you want to talk property investing, then yeah, just book a free consult with us, and we're happy to talk through how we can build you wealth, but how we can also build you wealth in line with your values, and your ethical framework.
Beautiful.
There you go, Nirvan.
That's it.
Any final thoughts?
No, I think the crux of it is you want to be able to sleep well at night. And something as business partners that we agreed on right at the start is like we want to be able to sleep well at night. Otherwise, we could have done many other things in the business from our own value framework perspective. So
could be shilling off the plan apartments,
basically
making 80K per deal.
I made a post about this on LinkedIn today, so I'm a little bit salty. So you can look at that LinkedIn post.
Done.
But yeah, I think that's the crux of it. So as long as you're comfortable, go ahead and do it.
Beautiful. Thanks, Nirvan. Ciao, guys.
Ciao.
See you in the next episode.